May 17, 1942. Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, Territory of Hawaii. 11:47 in the morning. Captain Homer Ann Wallin stands on dry dock number 1, watching USS West Virginia rise from the water for the first time in 5 months. Her port side, what's left of it, emerges like the hide of some enormous corpse pulled from a grave. The battleship's armor belt looks like sheet metal crumpled by giant hands. Torpedo damage has ripped openings through her side protection system that engineers said was designed to withstand exactly this kind of attack. 7 separate impact points, each representing approximately 1,000 pounds of high explosive detonating against her hull. This ship should not exist, Wallin thinks as the pumps drain the last water from the dock. By every principle of naval architecture, she should be resting on the bottom with Arizona and Oklahoma. But West Virginia does exist, and she is not alone. Looking across the harbor, Wallin can see USS California preparing for her own dry docking. Nevada sits in dry dock number 2, already under repair. Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Tennessee have departed for West Coast shipyards. Even the destroyer Shaw, her entire bow blown off, has been rebuilt and sent steaming to San Francisco for final reconstruction. The numbers tell an impossible story. 21 ships damaged or sunk on December 7, 1941. 5 months later, 18 of them are either back in service or under active repair. The exceptions: Arizona, too devastated by the magazine explosion to salvage; Oklahoma, capsized and righted but too old to justify reconstruction; and Utah, the target ship, whose loss means nothing to combat capability. 18 ships salvaged from the mud and oil and death of Pearl Harbor's bottom. The Japanese Imperial Navy had calculated that America's Pacific battleship fleet would require 18 months to 2 years to rebuild, if it could be rebuilt at all. Naval analysts in Tokyo had examined photographs of Battleship Row and concluded the United States faced a strategic catastrophe requiring half a decade to overcome. They were examining surface damage. They hadn't calculated what lay beneath. Wallin had spent his entire career preparing for this moment without knowing it. 20 years of naval architecture study at MIT, 2 decades working New York, Philadelphia, and Mare Island Navy yards. Experience with ship construction, damage control, structural engineering, and underwater repair that no other officer in the Pacific possessed. On December 7, 1941, as Battle Force engineer, he'd watched the attack from the fleet flagship. On January 9, 1942, he took command of the newly created Salvage Division with 3 clear objectives: rescue trapped personnel, assess damage to each vessel, and repair as many ships as possible. Now, 5 months later, the 3rd objective approaches completion. West Virginia's reconstruction represents the culmination of salvage engineering that seemed impossible in December. She settled upright, thanks to rapid counterflooding by her damage control officer, but sat on the harbor bottom with approximately 65 crew members' remains trapped inside her flooded compartments. Raising her required building cofferdam patches covering virtually her entire portside midships. The Navy contracted Pacific Bridge Company, already working on new dry docks at Pearl Harbor, to construct massive wooden and steel structures that extended from the turn of her bilge to well above the waterline. Divers working inside and outside the hull assembled these patches in sections, then sealed them with 650 tons of concrete poured underwater using the Tremier process. 650 tons, the weight of a destroyer escort, poured as liquid into cofferdams built against a battleship's shattered side, curing beneath the Pacific. If those patches failed during pumping operations, West Virginia would flood completely in seconds, probably capsizing and crushing any salvage workers inside. What happened next defied all odds. If you're invested in this story of engineering triumph against impossible odds, click the like button to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss how this critical moment resolved. Back to West Virginia's incredible recovery. They held. The ship that Japanese torpedo bombers had sent to the bottom now sits in dry dock, destined for Puget Sound Naval Shipyard and a complete reconstruction that will make her more powerful than she'd been on December 6, 1941. This pattern, catastrophic damage followed by recovery, has repeated across Pearl Harbor's fleet. The salvage operation hasn't just recovered America's battleships. It has revealed a capability the enemy never anticipated. Industrial restoration at a scale and speed that makes permanent destruction temporary. The Japanese had calculated victory based on ships destroyed. They hadn't calculated America's ability to undestroy them. The assumption that Pearl Harbor would cripple the Pacific Fleet permanently had begun with a single miscalculation. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of the December 7th attack, understood American industrial capacity better than most Japanese officers. He'd studied at Harvard, served as naval attaché in Washington, and traveled extensively through American manufacturing centers during the 1920s. His famous warning, "I can run wild for 6 months to a year, but after that I have utterly no confidence," reflected genuine comprehension of what America could build once mobilized. But even Yamamoto hadn't grasped what America could rebuild. The Japanese attack plan, refined through months of training and rehearsal, targeted specific destruction. Torpedoes carried 450-pound warheads designed to detonate below the waterline, flooding battleships' machinery spaces and causing them to sink or capsize. Bombs, many converted from 16-inch armor-piercing naval shells, would penetrate deck armor and detonate in magazines or machinery spaces, causing catastrophic internal damage. December 7, 1941, 07:55 in the morning. The first wave of 183 Japanese aircraft struck Pearl Harbor. Within 30 minutes, chaos reigned across Battleship Row. Arizona exploded when a bomb detonated in her forward magazine, killing 1,177 men instantly. Oklahoma took 5 torpedoes in rapid succession and capsized, trapping 429 crew inside her overturned hull. West Virginia absorbed catastrophic torpedo and bomb damage. California took 2 torpedoes and 2 bombs. Nevada, the only battleship to get underway during the attack, suffered 1 torpedo and 6 bomb hits before beaching herself at Hospital Point to avoid blocking the harbor entrance. The second wave, arriving at 8:40, added to the devastation. In total, the attack killed 2,403 Americans, 2,008 Navy, 218 Army, 109 Marines, and 68 civilians. 21 ships suffered damage or sank. 188 aircraft were destroyed. Japanese losses, 29 aircraft, 5 submarines, 64 men killed. The tactical execution was nearly perfect. The strategic assessment seemed equally clear. America's Pacific battleship force was destroyed. Imperial General Headquarters in Tokyo received reconnaissance photographs showing Battleship Row transformed into a burning graveyard. Arizona's shattered hulk leaked oil. Oklahoma sat capsized, her red bottom paint visible above the water. West Virginia and California rested on the harbor bottom. Nevada sat beached. Pennsylvania sat in dry dock, damaged by bomb fragments. Japanese naval analysts calculated reconstruction timelines. Building a new battleship from keel laying to commissioning required 30 to 36 months. Building 8 battleships as replacement for the entire force destroyed would take years and consume resources America needed for war production. The math seemed irrefutable. Japan had bought the time Yamamoto requested. But the photographs showed surface damage. They didn't show Pearl Harbor's unique advantage. The harbor's depth averaged 40 feet. Oklahoma had capsized in 33 feet of water. West Virginia sat upright at similar depth. California rested in shallow water. When warships sink in deep ocean, they disappear beyond salvage capability. The technology to work at 200 or 2,000 fathoms simply doesn't exist. But 40 feet, that depth allows divers to work. Patches can be installed. Pumps can dewater compartments. The Japanese hadn't sunk the Pacific Fleet. They merely relocated it temporarily to the bottom of a very shallow harbor. Captain Wallin understood this immediately. Standing on the flagship's deck on December 7th, watching Arizona burn and Oklahoma capsize, his engineering mind was already calculating cofferdam sizes and pump capacities. Salvage operations began before the attack ended. Damage control parties sealed flooding compartments on Tennessee and Maryland, keeping them from sinking despite proximity to destroyed ships. Nevada's crew beached her deliberately to prevent blocking the channel. Pennsylvania sat in dry dock, repairable immediately. Within days, preliminary assessments identified salvageable vessels. Within weeks, the Salvage Division officially formed with Wallin in command. Within months, the first battleships were refloated. Nevada represented the proving ground. Hit by one torpedo forward and at least 6 bombs, she beached herself at Hospital Point with significant flooding forward. Salvage teams sealed the large torpedo hole with timber and concrete patches, then pumped out flooded compartments. After removing topside weight, guns, ammunition, and equipment, Nevada refloated on February 12, 1942, just 67 days after sinking. She entered dry dock number 2 on February 18. By April, preliminary repairs were complete. She steamed to Puget Sound for full reconstruction, returning to combat duty in December 1942, less than 12 months after Japanese bombs had nearly destroyed her. California followed Nevada. Hit by 2 torpedoes and 2 bombs, she'd settled into the mud, listing 11 degrees. Investigation revealed a critical vulnerability. Maintenance work on December 7th had left multiple watertight manhole covers off or loosened. The torpedo hits caused flooding that spread through improperly secured compartments, sinking a ship that might otherwise have survived. Salvage crews sealed torpedo damage with patches, then addressed the fundamental problem. California had sunk filled with water, mud, fuel oil, and the remains of 104 crew members. Every compartment required cleaning before repairs could begin. Divers worked in zero visibility, toxic conditions, and constant danger from unstable structures. They patched holes, removed debris, and recovered remains. Pumps began dewatering on March 19, 1942. California refloated March 24, entered dry dock, and departed for Puget Sound in October. The pattern emerged: patch, pump, clean, repair, rebuild. Each ship followed this progression. Each success made the next salvage faster and more efficient. But West Virginia represented the ultimate challenge. Her damage exceeded California's. Her reconstruction would prove whether truly catastrophic torpedo damage could be overcome. The salvage operation's success depended entirely on conditions the Japanese couldn't eliminate: shallow water, intact naval facilities, and American industrial determination. Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard had survived the attack largely intact. The Japanese hadn't targeted the shops, cranes, or dry docks. Critical error. Dry dock number 1 remained operational. The shipyard's machine shops, electrical facilities, and repair capabilities stood ready. The floating dry dock YFD-2, damaged and sunk during the attack, was refloated and returned to service by January 25, 1942, servicing the rebuilt destroyer Shaw. This infrastructure made rapid salvage possible. The work proceeded across multiple fronts simultaneously. While Nevada underwent refloating in early February, teams worked California and West Virginia. While California entered dry dock in March, Oklahoma's salvage began. Efficiency improved with each operation. Salvage methodology followed established patterns adapted to Pearl Harbor's unique conditions. First, remove trapped personnel, rescue living crew, recover remains of the dead with dignity and documentation. Second, assess actual damage versus visible damage. Divers examine underwater hull damage. Engineers evaluate structural integrity. Third, seal major openings. Timber patches for small holes. Steel cofferdams for large torpedo damage. Fourth, dewater. Pump out thousands of tons of water while monitoring stability. Fifth, remove weight. Offload ammunition, fuel, oil, and supplies to raise the hull. Sixth, reflot and dry dock. The process sounds straightforward. Implementation proved nightmarish. Inside West Virginia, Navy diver Edward Raymer and his team worked through flooded compartments in complete darkness. Their equipment, rubberized canvas suits with copper helmets, lead-weighted belts carrying 84 pounds, and lead-weighted shoes adding 36 pounds each, proved simultaneously essential and dangerous. Above water, the gear was awkward and difficult. Submerged, the weights counteracted suit buoyancy, allowing movement through ship interiors. Raymer described the conditions: Zero visibility. You work entirely by touch. Hydrogen sulfide gas from decomposing organic matter burns your throat and eyes. Unexploded ordnance everywhere. Oil so thick you can't see your hand against your faceplate, and you're inside a structure that could collapse at any moment. Navy and civilian divers made approximately 5,000 dives, totaling some 20,000 man-hours underwater during the overall salvage effort. Multiple divers died from toxic gas exposure. Others suffered injuries from unstable wreckage, decompression sickness, and equipment failures, yet the work continued. The destroyers, Cassin and Downs, blown off their blocks in Dry Dock No. 1 by bombs and fires, were stripped of serviceable machinery and equipment. Their hulls, too damaged for economical repair, were scrapped. But the machinery, engines, generators, weapons, and fire control equipment was salvaged, shipped to Mare Island Navy Yard, and installed in new hulls built around the original ship's identities and hull numbers. Even total destruction couldn't prevent renewal. If the hull was lost, rebuild it. If machinery survived, reuse it. The principle: nothing is permanently destroyed if America decides to rebuild it. The Minalea Oglala, capsized at her berth, presented unique challenges. Originally a coastal steamer commissioned in World War I, she was 34 years old with compartments never designed for battle damage. Salvage seemed questionable. Scrapping appeared more practical, but she blocked valuable pier space, and demolition experts were unavailable. So salvage teams rigged 10 submarine salvage pontoons, massive cylinders that could be flooded, sunk, attached to chains placed under the hull by divers, then pumped out to provide nearly 100 tons of lifting power each. Combined with winches and compressed air pumped into the hull, Oglala was righted and refloated. She returned to service as an internal combustion engine repair ship, serving until 1965. This pattern repeated. Apparent total loss transformed into operational vessel. The Japanese had assumed modern warships, once destroyed, stayed destroyed. American salvage crews proved otherwise. Tennessee, Maryland, and Pennsylvania required less extensive work. None had actually sunk. They received damage repairs at Pearl Harbor, then steamed to West Coast yards for modernization. Tennessee and Maryland rejoined the fleet by May 1943. Pennsylvania returned in March 1943. Even Shaw, her entire bow destroyed by magazine explosion in the floating dry dock, was salvaged. Workers cut away the destroyed forward section, built a temporary bow, and sailed her to Mare Island, where she received a complete new bow section. She returned to combat in August 1942. By mid-1942, the tactical picture had transformed completely. Nevada operated in the Atlantic on convoy escort duty. California, West Virginia, and Tennessee approached completion of their reconstructions. Maryland and Pennsylvania prepared for Pacific deployment. The fleet Japan had destroyed was returning to life. But the most dramatic vindication remained years in the future. These salvaged battleships wouldn't merely return to service. They would exact revenge at the site of history's last battleship against battleship engagement. October 25, 1944, 0353, Surigao Strait, Philippines. Radar operators aboard USS West Virginia picked up surface contacts at 42,800 yards, approximately 21.4 miles, steaming north through the strait where Rear Admiral Jesse Oldendorf's battle line waited. Oldendorf commanded 6 American battleships: West Virginia, Maryland, Mississippi, Tennessee, California, and Pennsylvania. 5 were survivors of Pearl Harbor. Only Mississippi had been elsewhere on December 7, 1941. The Pearl Harbor veterans were about to deliver their response to the attack that nearly destroyed them. The Battle of Surigao Strait represents the culmination of 3 years of American determination. West Virginia, sunk in Pearl Harbor with 7 torpedo holes in her port side, now led the American battle line, equipped with the most advanced radar fire control system in the world. California, which sank partly because loose manhole covers allowed uncontrolled flooding, sat in position with complete modernization, including new fire control systems and enhanced anti-aircraft armament. Tennessee, damaged by bombs and debris from Arizona's explosion, steamed in formation with upgraded weapons and electronics. These aren't the same ships Japan attacked. They'd been rebuilt, modernized, and equipped with technologies that didn't exist in 1941. The tactical situation represented a textbook example of naval advantage. Nishimura's force, already savaged by PT boat and destroyer torpedo attacks that sank Fuso and damaged multiple ships, steamed north into a classic crossing of the T. American battleships steamed east-west across the strait's mouth, allowing them to fire full broadsides at Japanese ships that could only return fire with forward turrets. At 0351, American cruisers opened fire. 2 minutes later, the battleships joined. West Virginia, equipped with Mark 8 fire control radar, achieved a firing solution immediately. She opened fire at 0353. Her 16-inch guns, 8 of them in 4 twin turrets, began firing armor-piercing shells weighing 2,700 pounds each at muzzle velocities exceeding 2,000 feet per second. Tennessee and California, also equipped with Mark 8 radar, commenced fire at 0355. Their 14-inch guns added to the bombardment. Maryland, equipped with older Mark III fire control radar, struggled to acquire targets independently, but ranged on West Virginia's shell splashes and commenced firing at 0359. The barrage was devastating. Inside West Virginia's gun turrets, the firing sequence repeated with mechanical precision. Powder bags and shells loaded into each gun, the breech closed, the fire control solution updated constantly as radar tracked the target. The order to fire sent electrical current to primer charges. The guns recoiled violently, each discharge pushing the 33,000-ton battleship sideways in the water. Muzzle blast squeezed breath from crew members' bodies and popped rivets from bulkheads. Cordite smoke, despite flashless powder, created thick clouds that were cleared by an easterly breeze. Aboard Yamashiro, the effect was catastrophic. American shells, 14-inch from Tennessee and California, 16-inch from West Virginia and Maryland, arrived at rates exceeding 1 salvo every 30 seconds. Hits penetrated deck armor, exploded in machinery spaces, started fires, and disabled weapon systems. Yamashiro fought back briefly, but her fire control systems, lacking radar, couldn't match American accuracy in the darkness. She slowed, continued firing, and took additional hits. Her superstructure became a mass of flame and wreckage. At 0409, Admiral Oldendorf ordered ceasefire. Yamashiro continued north briefly, then turned south, burning and listing. She sank at approximately 0419, with Admiral Nishimura and most of her crew. Heavy cruiser Mogami, also severely damaged, limped south. She would be finished off by American aircraft the next day. Destroyer Shigure, the only ship that immediately reversed course when the American bombardment began, survived to escape the strait. The statistics tell the story of American dominance. West Virginia fired 93 rounds of 16-inch armor-piercing ammunition. Tennessee fired 69 rounds of 14-inch. California fired 63 rounds of 14-inch. Maryland fired 48 rounds of 16-inch in 6 salvos. Mississippi managed 1 salvo. Pennsylvania never acquired a target. The entire engagement lasted minutes. The outcome was never in doubt. For West Virginia's crew, the moment carried special significance. This was the ship Japanese torpedoes had sent to the bottom of Pearl Harbor. This was the vessel salvage teams had raised from the mud using massive concrete cofferdams to seal torpedo damage. This was the battleship rebuilt from near total loss to become the most capable ship in the American battle line, and she had just helped destroy a Japanese battleship force at history's last battleship engagement. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. Vice Admiral Wallin, who'd salvaged West Virginia and the rest of the Pearl Harbor survivors, later wrote, "It was a matter of great satisfaction to many Americans, and it must have been a bitter pill for the Japanese." The Battle of Surigao Strait vindicated every decision made at Pearl Harbor between December 1941 and mid-1942. Every hour divers spent in toxic darkness inside flooded compartments. Every ton of concrete poured into cofferdam patches. Every pump running 24 hours a day for weeks to dewater battleship hulls. Every crew member who cleaned oil and debris from compartments where shipmates had died. All of it led to this moment. American battleships risen from the dead, crossing the T of a Japanese force and demonstrating that restoration was possible and revenge was inevitable. The decision to salvage Pearl Harbor's battleships rather than scrap them and build replacements reflected calculations rooted in industrial capacity and strategic timeline. In December 1941, the United States possessed exactly 0 battleships under construction. The last pre-war battleship class, North Carolina and Washington, had commissioned in 1941. The follow-on South Dakota class was building, but the lead ship wouldn't commission until March 1942, with the rest following through 1943. The Iowa class, ordered in 1939 and 1940, wouldn't see first ships operational until 1943 and 1944. Building a new battleship from keel laying to commissioning required approximately 30 months under wartime conditions. Replacing the 8 battleships damaged or sunk at Pearl Harbor with new construction would push the first replacement into service in mid-1944 at absolute earliest, and only if shipyard capacity, steel allocation, and skilled workforce all aligned perfectly. The mathematics were brutally simple. America needed battleships immediately for convoy escort, shore bombardment, and fleet operations. Waiting 30 months per ship was strategically unacceptable. But salvage and reconstruction, that timeline measured in months, not years. Captain Wallin and his team calculated comparative costs. Building a new Colorado-class battleship like West Virginia or California required approximately $21 million in 1920s costs, roughly $300 million in 1940s dollars. Construction consumed approximately 32,000 tons of steel, 6,000 tons of armor plate, specialized machinery, weapons systems, fire control equipment, and thousands of skilled workers over 30 months. Salvaging and reconstructing West Virginia required different resources: timber and concrete for patches, pump capacity, dry dock time, replacement equipment where necessary, and shipyard labor. The cost, approximately $20 to $25 million for complete reconstruction including modernization, was less than 1/10 the cost of building a replacement. The timeline. West Virginia refloated May 1942, entered dry dock June 1942, departed for Puget Sound April 1943, returned to combat July 1944. Total time from sinking to combat readiness, 31 months. Nearly identical to building a new battleship, except salvage work began immediately, while new construction would require design, ordering, steel allocation, and shipyard scheduling delays. For Nevada, the numbers improved dramatically. Sunk December 7, 1941, refloated February 12, 1942, departed for Puget Sound, April 1942, returned to combat October 1942. 10 months from sinking to combat operations. The strategic calculus was clear. Salvage provided operational battleships faster and cheaper than new construction. But the decision also reflected American industrial philosophy that fundamentally differed from enemy doctrine. When Japanese capital ships suffered severe damage, naval doctrine favored quick assessment. If rapid repairs were impossible, scrap the ship and reassign the crew. This conserved resources for new construction and avoided tying up shipyard capacity with lengthy reconstructions. American doctrine took the opposite approach. If any possibility of salvage existed, attempt it. The United States possessed sufficient industrial capacity to pursue multiple paths simultaneously, salvage damaged ships while building new ones. Where Japan faced resource constraints requiring difficult choices, America's industrial scale eliminated the need to choose. This difference in philosophy would manifest throughout the Pacific War. Japan lost carriers at Midway, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, and couldn't replace them fast enough. America lost Lexington, Yorktown, Wasp, and Hornet, yet maintained carrier superiority through massive construction programs that delivered Essex-class carriers at rates Japan couldn't match. The salvage of Pearl Harbor's battleships demonstrated this principle at war's beginning. American industrial capacity could restore the dead while simultaneously building the future. The engineering challenges were immense. West Virginia's cofferdam patches required Pacific Bridge Company to construct massive timber and steel structures underwater, seal them with concrete, then truss them to hold against water pressure while pumps removed thousands of tons of water from the battleship's interior. If those patches failed during dewatering, the ship would flood catastrophically, likely capsizing and killing salvage workers inside. California salvage required solving different problems: extensive flooding through improperly secured compartments, mud contamination throughout the ship, and removal of remains from 64 dead crew members. Oklahoma's righting involved external rigging with massive purchase cables and elaborate shoring to prevent structural collapse. Each ship presented unique engineering challenges. Each challenge was overcome. By war's end, the salvage program's accomplishments would be clear. 18 of 21 damaged ships returned to service. $3 billion worth of warship hulls, weapons, and equipment saved. Approximately 20,000 man-hours of underwater work by divers who risked death with every dive, and revenge delivered at Surigao Strait by ships the enemy thought permanently destroyed. The salvaged battleship's combat records spanned the Pacific War from 1942 through Japan's surrender, demonstrating that recovery meant capability, not merely symbolism. Nevada, the first Pearl Harbor battleship returned to combat, spent 1942 and 1943 on Atlantic convoy escort and training duties. But in June 1944, she steamed to Normandy and participated in the D-Day landings. Her 14-inch guns bombarded German fortifications at Utah Beach, providing fire support for troops going ashore. She remained off Normandy through late June, then participated in the invasion of southern France in August 1944. Transferred to the Pacific in 1945, Nevada provided fire support at Iwo Jima and Okinawa, bombarding Japanese defensive positions with the same guns that had survived Pearl Harbor. At Okinawa, she was hit by a kamikaze aircraft on March 27, 1945, and by shore battery fire on April 5, suffering casualties but remaining operational. Tennessee returned to combat in May 1943. She participated in the Aleutian Islands campaign, bombarding Japanese positions at Kiska. In late 1943, she joined operations in the Central Pacific, providing fire support at Tarawa, where Marines encountered devastating opposition from Japanese defenders. Her guns helped suppress enemy fire during the assault. Tennessee participated in virtually every major amphibious operation thereafter: Kwajalein, Eniwetok, Saipan, Guam, Tinian, Peleliu, Leyte Gulf, Lingayen Gulf, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. At Surigao Strait, she fired 69 14-inch shells, helping destroy Yamashiro. By war's end, Tennessee had conducted more combat operations than any other salvaged battleship. 11 major engagements between Pearl Harbor and Japan's surrender. California, after extensive reconstruction at Puget Sound, returned to combat in January 1944. She participated in the Marianas Campaign, bombarding Saipan, Guam, and Tinian. At Surigao Strait, her 63 14-inch shells contributed to the Japanese defeat. She continued through the Philippines Campaign, supported the Lingayen Gulf landings, and provided fire support at Okinawa. Maryland, less heavily damaged at Pearl Harbor, returned to combat earlier than the sunken battleships. She participated in operations at Tarawa, Kwajalein, Saipan, and Palau before Surigao Strait, where she fired 48 16-inch shells. During the late campaign, she was hit by a kamikaze on November 29, 1944, suffering significant casualties, 31 killed and 30 wounded, but remaining operational. Repairs completed, she returned for Okinawa, where another kamikaze struck her on April 7, 1945, causing additional casualties. Pennsylvania, damaged in dry dock at Pearl Harbor, returned to combat in 1943. She conducted operations across the Central Pacific: Attu, Kiska, Makin, Kwajalein, Eniwetok, Saipan, Guam, Palau, Angkor, and Peleliu. She participated at Surigao Strait, but never acquired a target due to fire control issues. At Okinawa, She was struck by an aerial torpedo on August 12, 1945, 3 days before Japan's surrender, suffering heavy casualties, 20 killed, 10 missing, and 19 wounded. West Virginia's combat career began July 1944 after the most extensive reconstruction of any salvaged battleship. At Surigao Strait, she led the American battle line, fired 93 16-inch shells, and demonstrated the effectiveness of her modern fire control radar. She supported operations at Leyte, Lingayen Gulf, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. At Okinawa, a kamikaze struck her on April 1, 1945, killing 4 crew members, but the damage was minor. On September 2, 1945, USS West Virginia anchored in Tokyo Bay for Japan's formal surrender ceremony, one of the ships present for the war's end. The symbolism was profound. A battleship sunk at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, reconstructed from near-total loss, veteran of the war's last battleship engagement, present at the moment, Japan admitted defeat. The salvaged battleship's collective combat record demonstrates strategic value beyond mere numbers. Nevada, D-Day bombardment, Southern France invasion, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, California, Saipan, Guam, Surigao Strait, Okinawa. Tennessee, 11 major operations from the Aleutians through Okinawa, West Virginia, Surigao Strait, Leyte, Lingayen Gulf, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Tokyo Bay. Maryland, multiple operations, survived 2 kamikaze hits. Pennsylvania, extensive Central Pacific operations. These ships didn't merely return to service. They fought across every major amphibious operation from 1943 through 1945. The cost in American lives aboard these salvaged ships is documented, hundreds killed and wounded across all operations. But their contribution to victory justified every hour spent raising them from Pearl Harbor's bottom. Most significantly, at Surigao Strait, 5 Pearl Harbor survivors executed the war's last battleship engagement, crossing the T of a Japanese force in perfect textbook fashion. West Virginia, California, and Tennessee, ships the Japanese had sunk or severely damaged, delivered the final verdict on whether salvage had been worthwhile. The answer arrived at 2,000 feet per second in 16-inch and 14-inch armor-piercing shells. The complete salvage and reconstruction record of the Pearl Harbor attack reveals the true scope of American industrial determination. Ships sunk or damaged December 7, 1941, 21. Battleships. USS Arizona, BB-39, hit by 4 800-kilogram bombs, one detonating in the forward magazine causing a catastrophic explosion. Sunk, 1,177 killed. Total loss. Hull remains at Pearl Harbor as memorial. USS Oklahoma, BB-37, hit by 5 torpedoes, possibly 6, capsized in 33 feet of water, 429 killed. Righted using external winches, March through June 1943, but too old for economical reconstruction, sold for scrap 1946, sank under tow May 1947. USS West Virginia, BB-48, hit by 7 torpedoes and 2 armor-piercing bombs. Sunk, 106 killed. Refloated May 1942. Complete reconstruction. Puget Sound, 1942 through 1944. Returned to combat July 1944. Participated Surigao Strait. Supported Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Present at Tokyo Bay surrender. Decommissioned 1947. USS California, BB-44, hit by 2 torpedoes and 2 bombs, sunk in shallow water, 104 killed. Refloated March 1942. Complete reconstruction. Puget Sound, 1942 through 1944. Returned to combat, January 1944. Participated Saipan, Guam, Surigao Strait, Okinawa, decommissioned 1947. USS Nevada, BB-36, hit by 1 torpedo and 6 bombs, beached at Hospital Point, 60 killed, refloated February 1942. Departed Pearl Harbor, April 1942. Returned to combat October 1942, fastest salvage of any sunken battleship. D-Day bombardment, Normandy, June 1944. Southern France, August 1944. Iwo Jima, Okinawa, survived war. Used as target ship for atomic bomb tests, Bikini Atoll, 1946. Finally sunk as gunnery target, July 1948. USS Pennsylvania, BB-38. In dry dock, hit by bomb fragments from Cassin and Downs explosions, minor damage, remained in service. Extensive operations, Central Pacific. Torpedoed by Japanese aircraft, August 12, 1945, 3 days before surrender, 20 killed, survived war, decommissioned 1946. USS Tennessee, BB-43, moored inboard of West Virginia, struck by 2 bombs, damaged by burning oil and debris from Arizona. Minor casualties, temporary repairs, Pearl Harbor. Full modernization, Puget Sound, returned 1943, conducted 11 major operations, Surigao Strait participant, survived war, decommissioned 1947. USS Maryland, BB-46, moored inboard of Oklahoma, hit by 2 bombs, minor damage, temporary repairs, Pearl Harbor. Departed December 1941. Operations throughout war. Surigao Strait participant. Hit by 2 kamikazes, 1944 and 1945. Survived war. Decommissioned 1947. Cruisers. USS Helena, CL-50. Torpedoed, damaged, repaired, returned to combat. Sank at Battle of Kula Gulf, July 1943. USS Honolulu, CL-48. Damaged by near-miss bombs, minor repairs, returned to combat. Survived war. USS Raleigh, CL-7. Torpedoed, severe list but remained afloat. Repaired, Pearl Harbor. Returned to combat mid-1942. Survived war. Destroyers. USS Cassin, DD-372. In dry dock. Bombs caused fires, blown off blocks, severe damage. Hull scrapped, machinery salvaged, and installed in a new hull, bearing the same name and hull number. Returned to combat, 1944. USS Downs, DD-375. In dry dock with Cassin. Similar damage and reconstruction. Returned to combat 1944. USS Shaw, DD-373. Bombs hit forward magazine causing explosion. Entire bow destroyed. Temporary bow constructed Pearl Harbor. Sailed to Mare Island for complete new bow. Returned to combat August 1942. USS Helm, DD-388. Damaged by near-miss bombs, minor repairs. Returned to combat January 1942. Auxiliary ships. USS Oglala, CM-4. Mine layer. Torpedoed and capsized. Raised April through July 1942. Converted to engine repair ship. Served until 1965. USS Vestal, AR-4. Repair ship. Moored alongside Arizona. Damaged by bombs and Arizona explosion. Self-repaired. Continued service throughout war. USS Curtis, AV-4. Seaplane tender. Hit by bomb and crashed aircraft. Repaired within 4 days. Continued service. USS Sotoyomo, YT-9. And USS YD-2. Auxiliary vessels. Damaged and repaired. USS Utah, AG-16. BB-31. Former battleship serving as target ship. Torpedoed and capsized. 64 killed. Partial salvage for equipment recovery. Hull remains at Pearl Harbor. Final count? Total ships damaged or sunk, 21. Total losses beyond recovery, 3. Arizona, Oklahoma, Utah. Ships salvaged and returned to combat, 18. Comparative analysis. Building 8 new battleships to replace damaged or sunk vessels would have required construction time per ship 30 to 36 months minimum. First replacements, operational mid-1944 at earliest. Total cost, approximately $2.4 billion in 1940s dollars. Steel required approximately 256,000 tons, and massive shipyard capacity allocation away from other construction. Actual salvage program: fastest return to combat, Nevada, 10 months. Average return to combat, 24 to 30 months. Total salvage cost approximately $200 to $250 million. Resources saved over $2 billion in hulls, equipment, and weapons. Diver fatalities: multiple deaths from toxic gas exposure and accidents. The American industrial advantage becomes clear in these numbers. Japan couldn't afford extensive salvage of severely damaged capital ships. Limited resources, shipyard capacity, and industrial base forced choices between salvage and new construction. America pursued both paths simultaneously, salvaging Pearl Harbor ships while building new construction at rates Japan couldn't match. While salvaged battleships returned to combat, new South Dakota and Iowa-class battleships joined the fleet. While destroyers Cassin and Downs were rebuilt, new Fletcher-class destroyers streamed from American shipyards at rates approaching one per week. The salvage of Pearl Harbor demonstrated that American industrial capacity operated under different rules than enemy calculations assumed. What Japan considered permanent destruction, America treated as temporary setback. September 2, 1945. Tokyo Bay, Japan. USS West Virginia swings at anchor among dozens of Allied warships gathered for history's most significant surrender ceremony. Aboard USS Missouri, General Douglas MacArthur and Admiral Chester Nimitz prepared to receive Japanese representatives who would sign surrender documents ending World War II. The arc from December 7, 1941 to September 2, 1945, measures more than time. It measures American industrial will made manifest in steel. Vice Admiral Wallin, who commanded the salvage operation that raised West Virginia from Pearl Harbor's bottom, retired in 1955. His Distinguished Service Medal citation read, "Through his tireless and energetic devotion to duty and benefiting by past experience, he accomplished the reclamation of damaged naval units expeditiously and with success beyond expectation." Success beyond expectation. Those 4 words capture what Japanese planners failed to anticipate. When reconnaissance photographs reached Tokyo on December 8, 1941, they showed Battleship Row as a graveyard, capsized hulls, burning wrecks, oil-slicked water reflecting the glow of Arizona's funeral pyre. Japanese naval staff calculated that restoring this devastation would require years, time for consolidating conquests and building defensive perimeters America couldn't overcome quickly. They'd seen the surface. They'd missed what lay beneath: shallow water, intact shipyards, and an industrial system that refused to accept permanent as an answer. The battleships came back not as symbols but as weapons more capable than before their destruction. History remembers dramatic moments: the crossing of the T at Surigao Strait, the bombardments of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, the surrender ceremony in Tokyo Bay, but the real victory was quieter. It happened in darkness inside flooded compartments, where divers worked by touch alone. It happened in dry docks, where workers poured concrete into cofferdams, while knowing a single failure meant death. It happened in engineering offices, where salvage officers calculated pump capacities and cofferdam sizes, while the rest of the world wrote these ships off as lost. The lesson transcends naval warfare. It reveals what happens when enemies face an opponent who treats destruction as temporary inconvenience rather than permanent catastrophe. When Japan designed military equipment, resource constraints forced terrible choices. When Germany developed weapons, limited production forced emphasis on technical brilliance over volume. When America faced industrial challenges, the response eliminated the need to choose: build the best equipment in overwhelming quantities, salvage damaged vessels while building replacements, develop new technology while improving existing designs. That advantage, industrial capacity that could pursue multiple paths simultaneously, proved impossible to overcome. The ships that fought at Surigao Strait weren't the same vessels Japan attacked. They'd been rebuilt with improved armor, advanced radar, enhanced anti-aircraft armament, and fire control systems that gave them decisive advantages. West Virginia's Mark 8 radar allowed her to open fire over 20 miles away in complete darkness with accuracy Japanese ships couldn't match. Technology, industrial capacity, and determination to restore damaged equipment faster than enemies can destroy it. These advantages decide modern wars. Pearl Harbor's salvage operation proved this principle when it mattered most. The Ghost Fleet came back, and it came back stronger.